It was a cold, gray afternoon in the heart of the city, the kind where the chill seemed to seep right through your skin, leaving you yearning for warmth. On the corner of a bustling street, amidst the hum of passing cars and the distant chatter of strangers, a woman named Maria walked with her head slightly bowed, her worn coat pulled tightly around her. Maria wasn't just any woman, she was someone life hadn't been kind to. A single mother, juggling odd jobs to make ends meet, she knew the weight of every penny she earned. Each step she took was heavy with the worry of overdue bills and an empty fridge waiting at home. As she turned onto a quieter street, her eyes caught something on the ground. A wallet. It was lying there, almost out of place against the cracked sidewalk. For a moment, she hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone nearby had dropped it. But the street was empty. She bent down, her fingers brushing against the leather, and picked it up. The wallet was heavy, the kind that felt expensive even in her hands. Her heart raced as she opened it. Inside, there was more money than she had ever seen in one place, crisp bills neatly stacked, along with a few credit cards and an ID. Maria's breath caught. Her mind raced with possibilities. This money could change everything for her and her young daughter. It could mean rent paid on time, groceries stocked for weeks, and maybe even a warm coat to replace the threadbare one she wore. But then her eyes landed on the ID. A man's face stared back at her, a stranger, but someone who clearly owned this fortune. She felt a pang of guilt. Taking the money wasn't an option. It wasn't who she was. Maria had always believed in doing the right thing, no matter how hard life got. With a deep sigh, she tucked the wallet into her bag and made her way to the address listed on the ID. Her steps were slow, her mind filled with doubt. What if this person didn't appreciate her effort? What if they accused her of stealing? Or worse, what if they simply didn't care? Still, Maria knew she couldn't let herself be consumed by fear. Doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was what her mother had taught her, and it was the example she wanted to set for her daughter. When she finally arrived at the address, she found herself standing in front of a massive iron gate. Beyond it stood a mansion that looked like something out of a dream or a movie. The house was enormous, with gleaming windows and perfectly manicured lawns. Maria's stomach tightened. She was far from her world now, standing in a place where wealth dripped from every corner. She pressed the intercom button, her hands trembling slightly. A voice crackled through. "Yes? Who is it?" Maria swallowed hard. "Hi, I found a wallet. I think it belongs to someone here." There was a pause, and then the gate slowly began to open. As Maria stepped inside, her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't help but wonder who was the man in the photo? And how would he react when he saw her, a poor woman with nothing to her name, standing at his door with his lost wallet? Little did Maria know, her act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never have imagined. As Maria stepped through the gate, she couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place. The smooth stone path under her feet felt like it belonged to a different world, a world she could only dream of. She looked up at the towering mansion, its grandeur overwhelming. The windows sparkled in the afternoon light, and a large fountain bubbled quietly in the front yard, surrounded by lush greenery. It was the kind of place that made her feel small, like a speck of dust in a world she didn't belong to. A man appeared at the front door, tall and well-dressed, his features sharp and confident. He had an air of someone used to getting what they wanted, someone who never had to worry about anything. Maria's stomach twisted. Was this the man whose wallet she had found? She glanced down at the leather wallet in her hand, the weight of it now feeling heavier than ever. She wasn't sure what she expected, but this man didn't seem like the kind of person who would be grateful for a simple act of kindness. He looked like the kind of person who had everything: money, power, influence, and probably didn't care about anything else. "Can I help you?" His voice was smooth, almost indifferent, but there was a glint of curiosity in his eyes. Maria hesitated for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I found a wallet. I think it belongs to you." He raised an eyebrow, glancing at the wallet in her hand, then back at her. His expression softened just slightly, but there was still a hint of skepticism. A wallet, you say? I don't recall losing anything. I found it on the street, Maria explained, her voice trembling a little. It had your ID in it. I just wanted to return it. The man stepped forward, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than she was comfortable with. He looked her up and down, taking in her worn clothes and the exhaustion in her eyes. Maria felt the weight of his scrutiny, but she held her ground, determined to do the right thing. Well, he said, his tone shifting slightly, I suppose I should thank you for bringing it back. He reached out to take the wallet from her hand, but before he could, a voice called from inside the house. Henry! Who's at the door? The man Henry, it seemed, paused for a moment, then turned toward the voice. Just a moment, Claire, he called back, then turned his attention back to Maria. Come inside. Let's talk for a minute. Maria felt a surge of uncertainty. She had only come to return the wallet, not to get involved in whatever this was. But before she could protest, Henry had already turned and was walking back into the house. She had no choice but to follow, her feet moving almost of their own accord. Inside, the house was even more impressive than the outside. The floors were polished marble, and the walls were adorned with expensive-looking artwork. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers, and soft music played in the background. It was the kind of place where everything seemed perfect, where money and luxury were woven into every detail. Maria felt like an intruder, like someone who didn't belong. Henry led her into a large sitting room, where a woman was seated on a plush sofa. She was strikingly beautiful, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that seemed both warm and calculating. Maria felt an immediate sense of discomfort. This was Claire, Henry's wife, no doubt. She was the kind of woman who could have anything she wanted, a woman whose life seemed untouched by the struggles Maria faced every day. Claire, this is the woman who found my wallet, Henry said, his voice still carrying that smooth, confident tone. Claire's smile widened as she stood up to greet Maria. Thank you so much for bringing it back, she said, her voice sweet, but there was something in her eyes that made Maria uneasy. It's not every day that someone does something so honest. Maria nodded, trying to keep her composure. I just wanted to return it. I didn't want anything in return. Oh, I'm sure, Claire said, her smile never faltering. But you must be wondering who we are. You're probably thinking we're just some rich couple who doesn't care about the little people, right? She chuckled softly, but there was a hint of something more in her voice, a kind of mockery that Maria couldn't quite place. No, Maria started, but Claire cut her off. Don't worry, we're not like that, Claire continued, her tone still sweet but now laced with something else. We appreciate your honesty. You know, it's rare to find someone with integrity these days. Most people would have kept the money. Maria felt a twinge of discomfort. She wasn't sure what Claire was getting at, but she didn't like the way the conversation was heading. She had come here to return a wallet, not to get caught in some strange game of politeness and hidden meanings. Why don't you sit down? Henry suggested, gesturing to the chair across from them. We can talk for a bit. Maria hesitated, but eventually sat down. She didn't want to be rude, but she also didn't want to be here any longer than necessary. The whole situation felt off. The way they were looking at her, the way they spoke it all, felt like there was something they weren't telling her. But what? What? And why? So, Claire began, her eyes gleaming with curiosity, tell us a little about yourself. What's your story? Maria felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to talking about herself, especially to people like them. She glanced at Henry, who was watching her intently, as if waiting for her to reveal something. She wasn't sure what they wanted to hear, but she didn't want to get caught up in their world of wealth and pretense. I'm just a mother, Maria said quietly, her voice steady but guarded. I work hard to take care of my daughter. That's all. Claire raised an eyebrow. Mother, huh? How nice. It must be tough, raising a child on your own. Maria nodded, but she didn't want to go into the details of her life. It was too painful, too personal. It's not easy, she said simply. Henry leaned forward, his gaze never leaving her. I'm sure you could use some help, he said, his voice smooth, almost coaxing. Life can be difficult when you're on your own. But there's always a way to make things better. A way to get ahead. Maria felt a cold shiver run down her spine. There was something about his words, the way he said them, that made her uncomfortable. It was as if he was offering her something, but she couldn't quite figure out what it was. And why was he so interested in her? She was just a woman who had found his wallet. That was all. I'm fine, Maria said, standing up quickly. I didn't come here to ask for anything. I just wanted to return the wallet. Henry stood as well, his expression unreadable. Of course. We appreciate your honesty, he said, his voice now colder than before. But sometimes, doing the right thing can lead to unexpected rewards. Maria felt a knot form in her stomach. What was he trying to say? Was he offering her something? She didn't want to be part of their world, didn't want to be dragged into whatever game they were playing. She just wanted to leave, to go back to her simple life, where things made sense. But as she turned to leave, Claire's voice stopped her. We could use someone like you, she said, her smile now gone, replaced by something darker. Someone with your integrity. Someone who knows what it's like to struggle. We could help you if you're interested. Maria froze. The offer hung in the air, thick with tension. She didn't know what to say. Should she leave? Should she stay? What did they want from her? The door behind her opened, and Maria's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew one thing: her life was about to change, whether she was ready for it or not. Maria stood there, frozen, her mind racing. The words Claire had just spoken hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Someone like you. Maria's heart hammered in her chest. What did they mean by that? What were they offering her? She didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. She didn't want to. But something about their tone, the way they spoke with such confidence, made her question everything she thought she knew. Her instincts told her to leave, to walk out the door and never look back. But her feet didn't move. She couldn't tear herself away. Was it curiosity? Or was it something more? She didn't know, but she felt trapped, as if the walls of the mansion were closing in around her. Think about it, Claire continued, her voice low, almost coaxing. You don't have to struggle anymore. We could help you. We could give you a chance to change your life. Maria swallowed hard. She didn't know what to say. She had always been proud of her independence, of the fact that she had never relied on anyone. But now, standing in this opulent house with these strangers, she felt small. The idea of having everything she ever wanted, security, comfort, a future for her daughter, was so tempting. But at what cost? Henry, standing silently beside Claire, watched Maria with an intensity that made her skin crawl. He had said so little, but his presence felt like a weight on her shoulders. There was something about him, something calculating in his gaze. She didn't trust him, but the longer she stood there, the more she felt like she was losing control. We're not asking for much, Claire said, her voice almost too sweet. Just a little trust. A little faith in us. We can make your life better, Maria. You don't have to do it all alone anymore. Maria shook her head, trying to clear the fog in her mind. She didn't want to be a part of whatever they were offering. But then, her thoughts drifted back to the wallet. The money inside. The life that had been left behind. She had returned the wallet, but it felt like she was being pulled into something much bigger than she had ever imagined. Was this what they had wanted all along? Was this some kind of test? Or worse, was she being manipulated? I don't know what you're offering, Maria stammered, her voice shaky. But I didn't come here for that. I just wanted to return the wallet. That's all. Claire's smile faltered for just a second, but then it returned, more forceful now. Of course. But you see, Maria, sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem. You're not just anyone. You've already shown us something rare. Integrity. and that's something we value. We could use someone like you. Someone who understands what it means to have nothing, to fight for what you want. We can make sure you never have to struggle again." Maria's breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a trap, and yet they also felt like a lifeline. She was so tired of worrying, tired of fighting, tired of feeling like she was always on the edge of losing everything. But at what price? What were they really asking of her? She had no answers, only a growing sense of dread. "I don't want your help," Maria said, her voice stronger now. "I don't need it." Henry's expression darkened for a moment, but then he quickly masked it with a forced smile. "You're making a mistake, Maria," he said, his voice colder now. "You don't know what you're turning down? But that's fine. We'll give you time to think about it." Maria turned to leave, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out of there. She had to escape this suffocating feeling, this pressure building around her. But just as she reached the door, Claire's voice stopped her once more. "Maria," Claire said, her tone now sharp and commanding. "You don't understand. We know who you are. We know what you need. You think you can walk away from this, but you can't. You've already made your choice." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Henry stepped forward, his gaze never leaving her. "You think this is about a wallet? About some misplaced money? No, Maria. This is about something much bigger. You've already been chosen, whether you like it or not." A chill ran down Maria's spine. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what they were saying. What did they mean, chosen? She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side. "You think you're just some ordinary woman," Claire continued, her voice low and dangerous now. "But you're not. You've already stepped into our world. You've already crossed a line, and there's no going back." Maria's hands shook as she reached for the door handle. She had to leave. She had to get out of this nightmare before it consumed her. But as she pulled the door open, a voice behind her made her freeze. "Maria, wait," Henry said, his voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. "You don't understand what's at stake here. You don't know what we can offer you. The power, the influence, the life you've always dreamed of. It's all within your reach. All you have to do is accept it." Maria turned slowly, her heart racing. The fear in her chest was now mixed with something else, something darker. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, their expectations pressing down on her. She didn't know what they wanted from her, but she knew one thing for sure: she was in too deep now. There was no turning back. The door had already closed behind her, and she was trapped. But as she looked at Henry and Claire, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than she could ever imagine. They knew something about her, something she didn't know herself. They were offering her a way out, a way to escape the life she had struggled with for so long. But was it worth it? Was the price too high? "Think carefully, Maria," Henry said, his voice calm, almost soothing now. "This is your chance. Your only chance. Don't throw it away." Maria's mind raced, her thoughts tangled in a whirlwind of fear, doubt, and temptation. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know who to trust. But one thing was certain: whatever happened next, her life would never be the same. Maria stood frozen, her mind racing, as Henry's words echoed in her ears. "This is your chance. Your only chance. Don't throw it away." The weight of the decision pressed down on her like a suffocating force. She had never felt so conflicted in her life. Her instincts screamed at her to walk away, to leave this place behind and never look back. But a part of her, the part that had struggled for so long, the part that had seen nothing but hardship, wondered if this was the break she had been waiting for. Could she really walk away from an opportunity like this? Could she truly turn her back on everything she had ever dreamed of? Her pulse quickened as she stood at the door, her hand still gripping the handle, torn between two worlds. The life she knew, filled with uncertainty and struggle, and the life they were offering one of comfort, power, and influence. But something deep inside her whispered that it wasn't that simple. There was more to this than they were letting on. They weren't just offering her a better life, they were offering her something much darker, something she couldn't yet understand. Before she could respond, a sudden noise behind her made her spin around. The door to the mansion slammed open, and a man stepped inside. His face was unfamiliar, but his presence was unmistakable. He was tall, with sharp features and a cold, calculating gaze that immediately made Maria's skin crawl. He was dressed in a sleek black suit, his expression unreadable, but there was an air of authority about him that made her stomach twist. "Henry, Claire," the man said, his voice low and commanding, "we need to talk." Maria's heart skipped a beat. Who was this person? And why had he interrupted their conversation? Henry and Claire both turned toward him, their faces immediately shifting from friendly to tense. The warmth that had once filled the room vanished, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. "Who is this?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt a sudden surge of fear, but she couldn't explain why. There was something about this man that didn't sit right with her. "This is Adrian," Henry said, his tone suddenly distant. "He's someone we work with." Adrian didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he walked past her, his eyes scanning the room as if he were searching for something. "I've been following your progress, Maria," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "I must admit, I'm impressed." Maria's mind raced. "What do you mean? Who are you really?" Adrian turned to face her, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "You're more than you think you are, Maria. You've already been chosen, whether you realize it or not." She took a step back, her breath catching in her throat. "Chosen for what?" she demanded. "What is going on here?" Henry and Claire exchanged a glance, their faces now filled with tension. "You don't know everything, Maria," Claire said, her voice no longer sweet but sharp. "You don't know who we really are, what we really do." Adrian stepped closer to Maria, his gaze never leaving hers. "You think you're just some ordinary woman, but you're not. You're part of something much bigger. Something you can't even begin to understand." Maria's mind reeled. What were they talking about? What did they want from her? She had only returned a wallet, for God's sake. Why was this turning into something so sinister? "Stop," Maria said, her voice trembling now. "I don't know what you're trying to say, but I don't want anything to do with this." Adrian's lips curled into a cold smile. "You'd have a choice," he said. "You're already involved. And there's no going back." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. What was he talking about? She had no idea what kind of game they were playing, but she was certain now that it wasn't just about a wallet. This was something much darker, something that threatened to pull her under. Suddenly, the room seemed to close in on her. She could feel the walls pressing in, the weight of their words suffocating her. She had to get out of there. She had to escape before it was too late. But as she turned to run, Henry stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. Maria's heart raced as she backed away from him, panic rising in her chest. "I'm leaving. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't care who you are or what you want from me." "You don't get to leave, Maria," Claire said, her voice now laced with venom. "You're already part of this. And if you think you can just walk away, you're wrong." Maria's breath quickened as she glanced around the room, searching for a way out. But there was no escape. The door was blocked, and the windows were too high to reach. She was trapped. "Why are you doing this?" Maria demanded, her voice shaking with fear. "What do you want from me?" Adrian stepped forward, his expression darkening. "What we want is simple. We want you to accept your place in this world. We want you to understand that you're not just a poor woman anymore. You're part of something much bigger. Something powerful." Maria shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. No, no. I don't believe you. I don't know what you want, but I won't be part of this. Henry's smile faded, and for the first time, Maria saw something cold and dangerous in his eyes. You don't have a choice, he repeated, his voice now hard. You're already in this, Maria. You've already made your choice. The room seemed to spin as Maria's mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? She had only come here to return a wallet, to do the right thing. But now, everything had changed. She was caught in a web of lies, manipulation, and deceit. And the more she tried to fight it, the more she realized that the stakes were higher than she could ever have imagined. Just as she thought she couldn't take it anymore, Adrian's voice cut through the tension. You think you're in control, Maria? But you're not. You never were. Maria's heart sank. What did that mean? What were they planning? The fear inside her grew, but so did her resolve. She wasn't going to let them control her. She wasn't going to let them win. But as the door behind her slammed shut, locking her in, she realized with a sinking feeling that the real battle was just beginning. And she had no idea how far these people were willing to go to get what they wanted. Maria stood in the dimly lit room, her pulse racing as the door slammed shut behind her. The weight of Adrian's words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder that there was no way out. She had tried to leave, tried to walk away from the darkness that had suddenly consumed her life, but now it felt like there was no escape. She was trapped, caught in a web of deceit and manipulation, and the people around her, Henry, Claire, and now Adrian, seemed to have all the power. But something inside her refused to break. She wasn't going to let them control her. She wasn't going to let them win. The more she thought about it, the more she realized they had underestimated her. She wasn't just some poor woman they could push around. She was stronger than they thought. And she wasn't going to let them tear her life apart. As the tension in the room grew, Maria's mind raced. She needed to find a way out, to expose them for what they truly were. But how? She couldn't trust anyone in this house, not even Claire, who had once seemed so kind and welcoming. The warmth in her eyes had disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. It was as if they had all been playing a game, and Maria had been the pawn. Adrian's gaze never left her, his eyes dark and unwavering. You think you have a choice, Maria? He said, his voice cold, but you don't. You've already made your decision the moment you returned that wallet. You're part of this now, and there's no turning back. Maria took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I don't know what you want from me, she said, her voice shaking but determined. But I'm not going to be your pawn. I won't let you control me. For a moment, there was silence. Then Adrian's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured her. It was the smile of someone who knew something she didn't. You still don't understand, do you? He said, his voice laced with amusement. You've been chosen, Maria. You've always been a part of this, even before you found that wallet. Maria's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? How could I have been a part of this before? Adrian took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You think you stumbled upon that wallet by chance? You think you were just doing the right thing by returning it? No, Maria. That wallet wasn't lost. It was meant for you. It was a test. A test to see if you had the qualities we need. Maria's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. A test? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. What kind of test? Henry stepped forward, his expression now serious. You're more than just a poor woman, Maria. You've always had the potential to be something greater. We've been watching you for a long time. Your integrity, your resilience, those are qualities we need. We've been waiting for someone like you to join us. Maria's chest tightened as the truth began to sink in. You've been watching me? She asked, her voice shaking. For how long? What do you want from me? Claire, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. We're not just offering you a better life, Maria. We're offering you power. Influence. A chance to be part of something bigger than you ever imagined. All you have to do is accept it. Maria's mind spun. She had always been the one to fight for everything she had, never relying on anyone. She had struggled her whole life to provide for her daughter, to make ends meet. And now, these people, these strangers, were offering her everything she had ever wanted. But at what cost? What were they asking her to do? "I don't want your power," Maria said, her voice steady now. "I don't need it. I just want to be left alone." Adrian's smile faded, and for a moment there was a flash of something dark in his eyes. "You don't understand, Maria. This isn't about what you want. This is about what you're meant to do." Suddenly, the room seemed to close in around her. Maria's breath caught in her throat as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. She wasn't just some random woman who had stumbled upon a wallet. She had been chosen for something she still couldn't fully comprehend. And as much as she wanted to walk away, as much as she wanted to escape this nightmare, she knew deep down that there was no going back. But just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. The door to the mansion opened with a creak, and a figure stepped inside. Maria turned, her heart racing, and to her shock, it was someone she recognized. It was the man whose wallet she had found, the man who had set all of this into motion. But he wasn't the same man she had met before. His eyes were filled with a strange, unsettling calm, and his face was expressionless. He walked toward her slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're wondering what this is all about," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I'm the one who set all of this in motion. I'm the one who wanted to see if you were the right person." Maria's head spun. "You? You're the one who left the wallet?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Yes. I needed to know if you had the qualities we were looking for. The qualities to join us. And now that you're here, it's time for you to make your choice." Maria's mind was a whirlwind. She didn't know what to believe anymore. She didn't know who to trust. Everything she thought she knew had been turned upside down. The man she had helped had been orchestrating this entire thing from the beginning. But why? "I didn't ask for this," Maria said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't ask for any of this." The man's expression softened, but there was a coldness behind his eyes. "You didn't have to. This was always meant to be. You've always been a part of this." Maria stood there, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She had never felt so torn in her life. The life they were offering her was everything she had ever wanted. But at what cost? What kind of person would she become if she accepted their offer? And could she live with the consequences? As the silence stretched on, Maria made her decision. She turned to face the man, her voice steady and strong. "I'm not part of your world," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "I don't want your power. I don't want your influence. I just want to live my life." The man's face hardened, and for a moment, Maria thought she had made a terrible mistake. But then, to her surprise, he smiled. "Very well," he said. "You've made your choice. But remember, Maria, you can never truly walk away from this. You're already a part of it. And one day, you'll realize that you can't escape." With those final words, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Maria standing there, her heart pounding. The weight of his words lingered in the air, and for a moment, Maria wondered if she had made the right decision. But as the silence settled around her, she knew one thing for sure: her life would never be the same again. Maria stood in the silence of the room, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a heavy stone. The man, whose name she still didn't know, had left, and the door had closed behind him with an almost final-sounding click. The tension that had gripped her since she first stepped into the mansion had not eased. If anything, it had grown even more intense, like a storm waiting to break. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. She had rejected the life they had offered her, the power, the influence, the world they had promised. But as she stood there, Alone in the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made the most important decision of her life. The future that lay ahead was uncertain, but at least it was hers to shape. Maria turned and walked slowly to the door, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty hallway. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't stay here. She couldn't be part of this world, this game of power and manipulation. She had to go back to the life she knew, the life that, while difficult, had always been her own. As she stepped out into the night air, the cool breeze felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that there was still hope beyond the darkness she had just left behind. She had been chosen, but she had chosen her own path in return. She had chosen to walk away from the lies, the manipulation, and the promises of a better life that came with a price she wasn't willing to pay. Maria didn't know what the future held, but she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had faced a choice that many would have found impossible to make, and yet she had made it. She had stayed true to herself, to her values, and to the life she had fought so hard to build. Days passed, and life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Maria went back to her job, to her daughter, to the simple life she had always known. But things were different now. She had seen the darker side of the world, the side that most people never even knew existed. And although she had walked away from it, she couldn't forget the lessons it had taught her. Her life was still filled with challenges. The struggle to make ends meet was still there. But now, there was a new sense of purpose, a quiet strength that had come from facing the hardest decision of her life and emerging stronger for it. She had found something within herself that she hadn't known existed. A resilience, a determination that had been forged in the fire of adversity. But even as Maria embraced her newfound strength, there were moments when the memories of that night haunted her. The words of the man echoed in her mind: "You're already part of this. You can never truly walk away." She had dismissed them at the time, but now, weeks later, they lingered like a shadow, always just out of reach. What had he meant? Was there more to this than she had realized? Was she really free, or was she still somehow entangled in the web they had woven? One afternoon, as Maria sat in her small apartment, folding laundry and listening to her daughter's laughter from the other room, the phone rang. The sound of it sliced through the quiet, pulling her back to reality. She glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she hesitated. But then, with a deep breath, she answered. "Hello," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "Maria?" A voice on the other end said, and her stomach dropped. It was a voice she recognized, though it had been weeks since she had last heard it. It was Henry. "Henry?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you," he said, his tone urgent. "It's important." Maria's heart raced. She'd hoped she would never hear from any of them again, but here he was, calling her. She felt a rush of anger and fear, but she tried to keep her composure. "I don't want anything to do with you or your world, Henry," she said firmly. "I made my choice." "I walked away." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I know," he said quietly. "But that's why I'm calling. You need to understand something. What you think you walked away from, it's not over. You're still part of it, Maria. And they won't let you go." Maria's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" "They're watching you," Henry said, his voice low. "They know you're not one of us, but they're not going to let you go that easily. You've already been marked. And they'll come for you when you least expect it." Maria's mind spun. She had thought she was free. She had thought she had made the right choice, but now Henry's words made her doubt everything. Was she really free? Had she made a mistake by walking away? "What do I do?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. "You need to be careful," Henry said, his voice filled with a strange urgency. "Don't trust anyone. Not even me. They have eyes everywhere. And if they want you, they'll get you. There's no escaping it." The line went dead. Maria stood there, holding the phone in her hand, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? What had she gotten herself into? She had thought that by walking away, she had left it all behind, but now it seemed like she was only at the beginning of something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. She had made her choice. But now it seemed like the world she had tried to escape was pulling her back in. And as she looked out the window, watching the sun set over the city, Maria realized that no matter how hard she tried, she could never truly escape the life she had left behind. It would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her to make the next move. But even in the face of uncertainty, Maria knew one thing for sure: she would never give up. She had already fought too hard to let go now. She had found her strength, and no matter what happened next, she was ready to face it. She would fight for her freedom, for her daughter, and for the life she knew she deserved. And as the night settled in, Maria made a vow to herself. No matter what the future held, she would never let anyone control her again. She would fight for her own path, her own destiny. And she would never forget the lessons she had learned along the way. The story of the poor woman who found the wallet had come to an end, but the story of Maria's life was far from over. And as she closed her eyes that night, she knew that whatever came next, she would be ready.